To push the envelope means to surpass normal limits or attempt something viewed as radical or risky. It comes from the aeronautical use of envelope referring to the performance limits that cannot be exceeded safely. I love that by itself. The phrase was originally limited to spaceflight before spreading to other risky physical accomplishments and finally metaphorically to any boundary pushing activity such as art.
Welcome to the Leadership Currency Podcast, the podcast dedicated to helping leaders be free from the nonsense that keeps them from being their best self, centered around discussions about leadership development through the lens of ancient truth and timeless wisdom. And now your host, Dr. Doug McKinley.
Hello, this is Doug McKinley. Welcome to the Leadership Currency Podcast. I'll be your host today, and I have a really cool interview that I've queued up for us, and this is with Martin Rowan. And the title of this podcast is Pushing the Envelope. There's a story behind this. I was working with Martin and one of his leadership teams that he's involved in, and everybody in the room that has worked with Martin kept saying that his superpower is pushing the envelope. And so once we started getting an understanding of what that is, I remembered that day, and I'm like, I got to talk to Martin about this skill set, like this unique ability. And so that's what we're going to talk about. Martin is the co-founder and CEO of Reveal USA. They do supply chain optimization and consulting. And his passion is to help companies leverage their current technology investment to optimize their integrated extended supply chains to achieve a world-class status. He's been doing this 25 years. He's only interested in transformational change. He is very active in local and international give-back programs. He's just been around the world and just a really unique leader, and I think you're going to really enjoy Martin and this superpower that he has, and we're just going to talk about it and hopefully you enjoyed it as much as I did. Hey, Martin, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Doug, it's a pleasure. It's so nice speaking with you again today.
Well, especially that we get to record it, because now we can actually look back and see if we said anything useful. So I know you will. I'll show up too. We're going to discuss really something that I believe, I don't think I've told you this, Martin, few people are good at, and even fewer understand the real value of it. So that's kind of my assessment. Few people are good at it, few leaders are good at it, and even fewer are actually that value it. So we're calling it pushing the envelope. So we'll define that in a minute. We'll get into the whole concept of it and why I think leaders need to really listen in and learn from it. Somebody who I think has mastered this, at least to his level at where he's at now, and he can always get better. So tell us your story. Who are you, and how did you find yourself in leadership roles at a young age, as I recall?
Yeah, it happened at around 16. And what really struck me was I was part of a group of about 5 guys, 5 friends, and they've all turned out to be unbelievable leaders in their own way. And we were just kind of good at a lot of stuff, right? We were good at academics, athletics. We played about every sport you can imagine, from rugby to cricket to some of the most amazing cross-country runners that we had. And we were just all pretty decently good at stuff. And what happened is at some point, all 5 of us, as part of a Boy Scout group, got sent to an out-of-state camp where it was kind of like a survivor kind of scenario. And obviously, we got, instead of actually being a team, we actually got divvied up to be spread across other teams. And I remember day one, you were supposed to pick your team lead. And so we were part of like about 15 young kids, young men, I should say, during the course of those 3 days. And it was supposed to be pick your leader. And then next day, you guys are heading into the woods for 3 days, and you got to figure out how to come back.
Wow.
And by the end of the day, this entire group of 14 other young men picked me as their leader. And I was completely taken aback, but for some reason felt pretty comfortable with it, stepped into it. And we were one of the few that actually made it back, and I think we were in the top three to actually come back at a certain time frame.
Are the rest of them still out there wandering around, or how,
Yeah.
when do we find them?
No, I know my friends are all back home,
Okay,
so it's
good.
all good.
Glad they made it back.
But I think where that and even at that time I didn't think much of it until I came back to high school, and one of the teachers said, "Ah, I heard about you leading one of the groups. It seems like we've discovered a new leader." And I think only when she said that I go, "Huh, I wonder what that really means."
Mm-hmm.
Because at 16, I don't think you really do.
That's very cool. Until somebody spoke it, you just spoke the word, and it provoked something inside of you, and the role that you played on that weekend survival trip. This is not in the U.S., I assume. This is where you grew up.
Yeah, this is back home in South Africa, and when we talk about the woods, we talk about the bush more
Yeah,
specifically.
that's
And
what I was curious about. This isn't in Texas or
no,
Indiana.
no, no.
This
This
is
is
like
this
in
is
the
the
bush of
wildlife
South
bush. There,
Africa.
yeah, this is where lions and cheetahs.
Tigers and bears are. Wow. All right.
Yeah, not so much tigers. That's in India, Doug. But
Okay.
the rest.
I didn't do good in geography. So. Yeah, so this is real survival stuff. That's cool. And then as you found yourself in college, did that pattern continue, or did you select, or how did leadership choose you, or did you kind of choose it?
No, I don't think it really changed much through college. I don't recall stepping into any major leadership roles through college. I studied civil engineering, and that was taxing enough to get through the engineering degree in 4 years. And frankly, that was really my focus, is to get through that. I did continue to find other areas that I would push myself, based on this topic of pushing the envelope, right? Is I did find myself getting into suddenly rock climbing and all kinds of other things that piqued my interest. But I don't think that really came out. I think the first time I really realized that leadership is a big part of my future again was when I sat on a plane flying back from somewhere, and I sat down and I wrote a letter to my wife, and it was just more of a journal more than it was a
Mm.
letter itself. And at some point there, I just wrote, I need to do something that where I can feel like I'm making a difference. And at that point, I think that was kind of the pivotal point when I realized that I need to start a business. I need to move into a space where I believe I can lead, a small group of people or a large group of people, either way. And that's just evolved from there, from mission trip leadership to, just other small group leaderships, but just general leadership roles that have come from that.
And did you start the company in South Africa or in the U.S.? I forget. What tell us that
We started
transition.
the company in the US.
Okay,
Yes,
Reveal as it stands today.
correct.
Gotcha.
2005. Yep.
2005. And you had been in the States how long before prior to that?
About 7 years. So we got here. That's actually an interesting story too. We talk about pushing the envelope. At some point, the company I was working for at the time said, "Hey, we're looking for somebody who wants to go over to the States and help start a company." And I looked at my wife, and we talk about us being young
Mm-hmm.
and adventurous, young, dumb, and adventurous, right? We had 5 years in marriage. We had a 5-month-old baby, and we packed up 5 suitcases and moved to the States and said, like, let's try this. And in many ways, we're somewhat of the American success story in the sense that we were able to make something of nothing and really do well over here. And that's honestly kudos to how this country allows people to be the best they can be.
Well, yeah, I'm glad to hear that, but it's you've carved out a very special niche and you've done very well, and I would give you some credit, but it's just the courage and yeah, pushing the envelope. Um, I'm I'm always intrigued by those stories that people would make, such a huge lifestyle change, right? Everything, family, relationship, security. That's another topic for another day, but
Sure.
so tell us about Reveal. I have, I'm a big fan of the Reveal movement, and but you have these beautiful mission, vision, purpose. Like you have some very intentional tablets. I don't know what to call them. You went to Mount Sinai and came down. I don't know. You have you have just a really cool brand. And just tell us a little bit about Reveal and the letter to your wife that you actually have done some of that. I mean, it's beautiful.
Yeah, I would say that, when we started the company, it was really to fill a gap in the market. It was solving a problem
Hmm.
that existed. And that was kind of the first of that letter that I wrote, is kind of the first impetus to saying, okay, let's make something of nothing and move it forward. But I think it only took a few years of us moving into that space for us to really realize that this is a much bigger thing than it is just to make money or make a particular solution fit this problem statement that exists. And so we've evolved to the point where we actually now have a purpose that we really put out there in the front of everything, and we talk about being an economic engine for good.
Mm.
And there's a lot said in that little sentence, economic, in that we are a for-profit organization. We want to make money, and we want to be able to use that money for good. We also an engine because we want it to be perpetual. We want to continue to grow and keep doing this. And then the good part is all about being healthy, generous, and multiplying. How do we do more of what we do and learn to care for others? Our motto is transforming what matters,
Hmm.
and that is for organizations, for individuals, and even though our company is very specific in its solution and what we do, we actually have the ability to touch a large number of people and have the ability to really change their lives. And we've seen that and heard that multiple times over. And so it's really easy when you know that even though our solution is very technical in nature and very educational in nature, we are doing it for a higher purpose, and our purpose is very clear.
Yeah, it is. It's lovely. I can't help but think about the old proverb about you can give a man a fish and he can eat today, or you can teach him how to fish. And your
Right,
organization teaches people how to do what they do. You don't do it for them, and it's brilliant and it's effective, and obviously it's been around for a while. But you just have I really love the intentionality, and I've gotten to have a front row seat to some of the ways in which you invest in your own people, which has been just, second to none. So it's really cool. And I think it's relative to the topic we're going to talk about. So that's why I wanted you to share a little bit about that. It's That's just not on the wall. Like I've gone and you serve. I mean, you just painted a Habitat for Humanity house or
yep,
something. I don't know what happened that day. It got changed. The day got changed, but you pack food for homeless shelters and feed my
right,
starving children. I mean, you guys actually activate into these places. It's not just you know, a narrative. So that's
right.
cool.
It's very much part of the DNA of the organization. I agree.
Yeah, and some love it and some don't, right? It's just like it's really something to watch. So I admire that and I'm a big fan. So the topic today is pushing the envelope, and I'm just going to tell the story first and then I'll define it. But the story was we were recently in a meeting. I don't know. It was this year, I think, wasn't it? And we were facilitating a
Yep.
meeting, and I don't know who came up with it, but the narrative about you was that you pushed the envelope, right? And so as we often do, we like to take humorous things and poke at them all. So I remember the whole meeting. That was kind of the buzzword. So I'm going to read a definition that I found, and I think it's close to what. And I want you to kind of put it in context of what you think your leadership team was saying about you. And I don't know if we said it in the bio, but you are the point person. You're one of the co-founders, but you're the lead leader. So to push the envelope means to surpass normal limits or attempt something viewed as radical or risky. It comes from the aeronautical use of envelope, referring to the performance limits that cannot be exceeded safely. I love that by itself. The phrase was originally limited to spaceflight before spreading to other risky physical accomplishments, and finally metaphorically to any boundary pushing activity such as art. And just so I can put this in context, I've done triathlons in earlier days, and you weren't impressed with that because you came back with, well, have you heard of what's it called, ultra running?
Ultra
Or it's
marathons.
a marathon. So tell us about that because I think that's a physical embodiment of pushing the envelope. What was this crazy thing you guys did?
Yeah, ultra marathons are really anything more than a marathon. So anything more than
Okay,
26
all right.
miles, and so yeah, I've been able to put my body through some extraneous running. Probably the one of the most extreme was I ran for an entire 11 hours straight. Um, from through the mountains and stuff. So yeah, it's pretty heavy. I've also ran multi-day races, so it is, and that is a little bit pushing the envelope for sure, and I can get into more of that. But I'll tell you one of the things that I really loved what you said there about that definition. Since I'm a pilot as well, funny enough, pushing the envelope again,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
It was a childhood dream of mine, and I'd be one would be by the time I turned 40, and at 39, I realized, oh dear, I'm not a pilot yet. And before my 40th birthday, I was a pilot.
Of
So
course you were, because that's just you.
exactly right. And so I really appreciate that definition because one of the things they do teach you is about the performance limits of any aircraft, right? That's
Sure.
the point of it. And every aircraft can go beyond those limits. It's just a question of whether it's safe or not. And so often they talk about representative limits, right? What they've been able to prove they can fly, but they don't necessarily go and measure, if some extreme maneuver or something. And an envelope is actually an illustration on a graph. It says, hey, if you've got a certain weight and balance and you've got certain dynamics, then you can only fly within these parameters, right? And that is your envelope.
That's how they came up
So
with that metaphor. Interesting.
right. And so I think for me, it makes so much sense. And actually, it's interesting. If there's one area I do not push the envelope, and that's in my flying.
Hmm.
And I can tell you, my wife definitely appreciates that for sure.
Yes, I'm sure.
Um, but other than that, yeah, it's a notion that was inherent in me, and I've had to really reflect on this since this was our topic of the day, to kind of think about some of the areas and how this came about. And there's actually quite a few good stories on where I think this could go. But yeah, it's ultimately what happens with my team is when we sit there and they say, you know, having me push the envelope is because that means if we want to go from A to B, I'll always be asking, well, why can't we go from A to C? Or if we want to go to A to B and A to B is the right path, can we do it faster? Or there's always some question, and I think it's uncomfortable for folks, right, to do
Yeah.
that. And what I think people struggle with is that they don't necessarily realize that really it's not just that I'm trying to press buttons or trying to question for the sake of questioning. In many ways, I'm doing that, pushing that envelope. It's kind of, again, the flying thing, right? You're pushing an envelope because you're trying to find your boundaries and options. And I think where your boundaries and options are, you can make better decisions. Sometimes when we say we want to go to A to B, the question is, why can't we go to C or D? That asks a question that makes C and D suddenly an option. And then we can just discount it if we don't believe it's the right one. And really pushing this envelope is really to get to the heart of the potential options that exist.
Mm. Yeah, that you said it. I'm so encouraged by how you so eloquently laid out what I watched. You don't even when you have a strength, it's usually something you cannot not do. It's not like you had to look at the drawing board and think, how should I say this? This just happens. Like you cannot not do it
Right.
in the flow of a strategy meeting and sometimes even not strategy meeting, which could be a problem. And so what does it mean to you? So when you're pushing the envelope for your team, what's happening inside of you that if you could hit the pause button, what do you think we would notice? Like what's driving that? I know it's happening in flow for you, but now that you look back at it.
Yeah, I think it does come very naturally, and that's part of the challenge I think for many folks. Um, It's very natural, and my brain almost instantly goes into questioning mode or option mode or solutioning mode, trying to push those areas. So, but I actually didn't know I was doing that, frankly, Doug, and that was part of the challenge to really think this through. And there was a book that I recently read, and I think in many ways it helped me articulate what that really was. It was by Owen McManus, and the book's called Last Arrow. And he tells the story of, in the ancient scriptures, there's a prophet called Elisha, and there's a king, Joash. And the king is under threat by an enemy. And he reaches out to the prophet and says, "What do I need to do?" And the prophet says to him, "You need to take your bow and arrow and take your arrow and specifically and strike the ground."
Mm-hmm.
And he doesn't say how many times, he doesn't give him any guidance, he just says, "Strike the ground with the arrow." And the king takes the arrow and strikes it 3 times and stops. And the prophet is just incredibly angry at him and kind of like, "Why did you stop? If you had continued to strike, maybe you could have won the war, but now you will only win the battle and not the war." And it's just one of those stories that just sat with me, because it was like, yeah, I probably would have not stopped striking at 3, but why is 3 not good enough, right?
Right.
It could have been good enough.
Right.
Maybe 4 was better. I don't know if it meant 20, but it's just that notion that you keep going and going and going and going and going until that boundary or that envelope is hit, and you say, "Okay, we've reached all the options."
Yeah, Forrest Gump just kept running until he was done. The whole world watched in the movie. And, none of us really know what the meaning of that was, but it was just fascinating, right? The way the producer was trying to tell a story. Yeah, I don't know if it's, like I said, it just happens in flow for you. And that's why I was curious if you knew where it came from. I think I'm familiar with the author that you're talking about. I think I was at the event you were at when he spoke about it. But are there other examples, practical examples at work where you notice yourself doing that? Personally, obviously you're climbing mountains, you're pushing, physically, but at work, what are some other examples where it's worked well for you, and others maybe where it hasn't worked well for you?
Yeah, I want to maybe take a personal one and a business one, if you don't mind. I think the personal one, coming back to the ultra marathon thing, is a good example. Is I was early on, I think it was also around that 39, 40 age. I went and did a normal physical and came back, and I had high cholesterol, and they were concerned that there was some calcification happening in my arteries at 40. And so the first thing the doctor wanted to do is put me on a statin. And I immediately revolted against that and asked if there were alternatives. Again, asking
Yeah, right. What else
the
is
options,
there?
right? And he says, "Yeah, of course, there's lifestyle issues, but," and as he said about but, and I was like, "Okay, I'll take that one." And I felt like I started running, and I was never a runner. I did track and field, like I said, in high school and stuff, but those were maximum 800 meters or something. And I did a 5K, and I was like super stoked about it. And then I did an 8K and a 10K, and it just slowly but surely happened. Then at some point, I was like, "Oh, I think I can do maybe a half marathon." And so I signed up for one and got it. And then I ran the Chicago Marathon. And then when you got to that, you're like, "Well, what do you do now? Do you keep running the Chicago every year, or do you now go run a marathon in every country or every state or every city?" And so my brain goes, "No, I want to push the envelope."
Wow.
So then
I stopped at 10K, just so you know. I never went past 10K. That was it.
I know, and this is nice. So you're talking about a sprinter who's suddenly running long distance, and then it became a 30K, 30 miler, which is 50K, and then it became a 57. That's the one that ran in South Africa, Comrades, which is
Wow.
just about 92 kilometers, and then I've done multi-day trans-Rocky ultras now through the Rocky Mountains, and so that's kind of the thing with this. It's almost trying to see where it ends, and I think from a business perspective, that's been really helpful too, because we could have done what we did the first time we came up with a solution, but if we didn't continue to ask and push and question, we wouldn't get either better at it, we wouldn't start making bigger differences in the world and in the clients that we work with. It would have been, it wouldn't have given us some of the innovative stuff that we're doing. And I'm not saying these are all my ideas at all. I mean, this is definitely a team effort. But just asking those questions or
Sure.
thinking about it differently, at some point, we also came off one of those conferences, and one of them was, how do we bend the curve, right? What does that mean? How do we do things differently? And out of that conversation came the idea that we could do a lot of the things we teach through some form of digital media. And we started down that path. And that was in 2019. That was not forced by COVID. That was something that came from pushing the envelope, asking
Right.
bigger questions. And then, of course, COVID just forced our hand and made it even accelerate even faster. But yeah, those are the things that happen in business in my mind. And honestly, I think it also helps our clients start thinking about how to run their business differently, more efficiently, more streamlined, because we ask those questions.
Oh, okay, that's right. So doing the consulting, I know I've not seen you in front of a B2B, but I know we're always pushing the envelope. So that's where you add value as a consulting firm to
Right. We talk about,
literally push.
yeah. I mean, for us, actually, it's one of our mantras. We talk about challenging the traditional thinking.
Yeah.
When we've been doing business for 20 years this way, we always challenge the business. Well, why can we not change? Let's try something different. Challenge that traditional thinking. In many ways, is just a subtle version of saying pushing the envelope, right?
Yeah, it is. It's a great application. I hadn't thought about it holistically from what the OVO process is and how you guys do your work. So let's get into the psychology of it. So it's interesting to me, but I think also to some in our audience. You've been leading and managing people all along. So what I think it's fair to say you've come across some people that don't like to push the envelope. Is that fair to say?
Oh, for sure.
Yeah. So what narrative do you make up? What movie do you make up about what prevents them from wanting to do that? Like, how do you justify that in yourself as you work with people that are like, well, that's risky, and what prevents people from really leaning into what you do so naturally from your perspective?
I think it comes down to it's uncomfortable. It's something that there's that quote that I shared with you the other day, and you can probably read it or play it at some point.
Oh, I want to. Yes. Thank you for reminding me.
Yeah, but that's really it. It's kind of going into the dark corners of the forest sometimes, and being comfortable with being uncomfortable. I don't mind being uncomfortable. It doesn't stress me out, and I can see how it affects others. And so I've had to learn to increase my emotional intelligence to really read the room and read the people better. And I still trip up, of course. My drivenness will continue to push that, and sometimes I stumble. But I think people don't go there because they're just uncomfortable being uncomfortable. And I think that true leaders, are constantly in somewhat of a state of uncomfortability. Because if you're not pushing your vulnerability, if you're not pushing your emotional intelligence, if you're not pushing your business, your people, and yourself, most importantly, your self-awareness, you get complacent, and then you're not going to be a leader. That at least the leader you could be.
Yeah,
So for me,
I'll read the quote in a second, but let me think of another phenotype. I think there are some that are very, very okay with being uncomfortable, but they don't think the juice is worth the squeeze. They aren't buying that heading in that direction is going to be better than where they are now. Would you describe that as uncomfortable or just resistance ideologically? Do you ever run into that?
yeah, I think there's definitely some of that. Sure, Doug. I mean, I can see how people would feel like it's not worth the squeeze, but I have very rarely come out the other side with not with some improvement, even if it's a slight improvement. I've never come out the other side with kind of pushing that uncomfortable space and at least going, huh, okay, at least I learned this or that, or there's something that comes from it. And I don't believe that any learning is not worth the squeeze, whether it's self-awareness or whether it's within a larger group. It is, every little piece of it is important to becoming that ultimate leader that you can be.
Hmm. All right, I'll read the quote now, and then I want to come back to that because I got a couple more questions about. It's natural for you, for highly ambitious and competitive people, but again, we have to work with others, right? Most of us. So I'm just fascinated by the dance that you've been involved in, and some of it I've gotten, like I said, front row seats to it. So here it is. You sent it to me, I don't know, recently, and it's just brilliant. And it's actually a quote that came out of an audiobook by Brene Brown, but the quote is technically from Seth Godin. So for leaders, vulnerability often looks and feels like discomfort. In his book, Tribes, subtitle, we need you to lead us, Seth Godin writes the following quote: leadership is scarce because few people are willing to go through the discomfort required to lead. So that might be our answer right there. Some people don't want to lead, they just want to do their job.
Right.
Right. So
Mm-hmm.
leadership is scarce. I agree with that. I think leadership is scarce. That's we have this whole podcast is about leadership because if we can elevate the value of it, the currency of it, I think we'll all well get to better places. So this scarcity makes leadership valuable. It's uncomfortable to stand in front of strangers. It's uncomfortable to propose an idea that might fail. It's uncomfortable to change the status quo. It's uncomfortable to resist the urge to settle. When you identify the discomfort, you've found the place where a leader is needed. I love that. If
Right.
you're not uncomfortable in your work as a leader, here it is. This is the money quote. If you're not uncomfortable in the work as your work as a leader, it's almost certain you're not reaching your potential as a leader. Mm.
Yeah, that's money for sure.
Mm.
And that so resonates with me. It feels so comfortable. The statement, so comfortable, because it's
You're one
so
of the weird
natural.
ones. Yeah, it feels
Yeah,
comfortable
because
because
it's
you
so
like it,
natural. Yeah,
right?
exactly right.
Well, actually, you don't know this. I wasn't sure if I was going to share it or not, but that came at a very timely moment for me last week or whenever you sent it. It had a huge impact. So thanks for just, pushing the envelope as you always do. It was, I'll share it with you some other time why, but it's very, very timely. So yeah, I think you said it earlier, and here's the quote from the book that it's almost certain if you're not uncomfortable in your work, it's almost certain you're not reaching your potential. Now I want to go back to employees and working, managing, and leading teams. People all around the country that might listen to this probably manage teams or groups of people, and they want to push the envelope, but they're getting great resistance. And so I asked you what is why do people tend to resist? As you've always found something good from it, but can you push all people the same way, or do we have to push people differently? Like in that setting, it was a group setting I observed, and you were pushing all of us. Have you ever noticed that there's a time to do it and not to do it? I mean, what's your observation about that?
Oh, I mean, it's for sure you cannot push everyone the same way. I mean, I can tell
You have two
you
kids that I know you have to probably do
exactly. I
differently.
mean, the way I push my kids is different than the way I may push my wife, even, or my
Hmm.
family, or friends and colleagues. There's different interactions. Then there's also different personality styles, right? I mean, that's
Right.
the one thing my self awareness I had to learn. With such a high D on the PI or on the disc or
Mhm.
whichever measure you have, it all tends to work out the same. Is that it is part of that DNA, but that's not true for everybody. And then some people take that actually as aggression, and they shrivel away. And then that
Thank
actually,
you. That's what I was getting at. Yeah, they do. They think you're being a jerk, right?
yeah.
Uh,
Well, that's maybe not a jerk, but at least somebody who's not considering their feelings, or
right.
not considering their circumstances, or not considering necessarily their views. And I don't think that's necessarily true. It's actually taking those views sometimes, but challenging it in a way that makes, again, creates the options of, is this a valid thought or a valid idea, or are there things we can build off of? Or is it maybe only this part of the idea is a good one, the other one may not work for these reasons, but let's take that for good one and let's expand it. And it's that constant pushing and driving to keep saying, how do we get to somewhere where we all go, yeah, that's the right thing.
Mm.
But you're right, 100%. And I've one of my self awarenesses is that, and I've only I've known you for a few years now, and I would say it's happened only in the latter part of my life. Really, is this whole emotional intelligence is just really understanding how people show up and how I need to show up for them in different ways. It doesn't necessarily mean I don't have to push or don't have to push the envelope per se. I may just do it slightly differently for different folks.
I heard a leader, John Maxwell, say recently that there's a big difference between manipulation and influence, right? So it's if you're not careful, even emotional intelligence can be used for a self agenda. So I've been keenly aware as I work with leaders as they develop more EQ that it has to be baked in the right motives. So I would say it goes back to motive. So is not pushing the envelope ever an option for you?
Yeah, I don't know actually.
I'm trying to think of one where you might have.
I mean,
It's okay. We'll just settle. It's fine. Let's just be that.
no, I don't. No, I don't think settling is ever part of my vernacular. I mean, I am going on no, just in about a week's time, I'm going on a
I know.
6 day, 300-mile bike packing, route in the Rockies again, unassisted, trying to get from one side to the other. And again, those are things just that I don't think settling is good enough. I could get up every day and do 10 push-ups and go, okay, I'm settled, I'm doing my fitness. But those adventures are helpful and drive me. And then that's the same with business too. I don't think we would have survived recessions and competition and be able to thrive in what we do if we didn't continue to push forward and keep eliminating that does not work and keep probing and pushing in those areas that do work.
Well, I would say maybe. I think because you are the chief architect of this enterprise, it's not going to work. There are other people that, you know, keep conservative organizations and afloat and play safe, and they survive. They just aren't as, I think it's in your DNA, and it's also in the DNA of the work that you do. It's not congruent to settle, because then it almost defies what you're trying to do with your clients. So then you have an integrity crisis.
Yeah, and I think it also comes down to how you see things. I'm an undiagnosed dyslexia, and I only say undiagnosed because my youngest daughter was diagnosed with it formally, and as she was going through her tests and stuff, I was starting to go yes and yes, yes, yes to all of the test questions.
That's shocking, isn't it? I know what
Yeah,
you mean.
and realize that I actually have it. And one of the challenges I was always faced with through high school and earlier was just my reading. As much as I love reading, I would mix things up. My math was always mixed up, even, which makes it kind of ironic that I became an engineer. But
Mm-hmm.
it's I just messed up those mixed things up. But yet there is, and only after she really was diagnosed did I really dive into it. And then there's something called the dyslexic advantage, and I started reading up about it, and they talk about how dyslexic people often see the world just differently. It's
Right.
like artists see the world differently than maybe engineers do, and vice versa. But dyslexic people see it very differently, and you see things that people don't see. And one of the things you talk about, John Maxwell, he talks about how leaders are not necessarily seeing not what everybody else is not seeing, but they're also seeing things that are possible that other people are not seeing.
Correct.
So it's seeing for possibility, but it's also seeing the things they're not seeing.
Right.
And I think that's been a massive advantage. And I can't say if it's that only. I don't know if it's purely that. I think it's also the personality that I am and the DNA that I have within. But I think that's really helped me see things differently. And I think that's been a big reason why, for me, and I can't speak for other organizations, but for me and my leadership and my team around me, is to say it's got to get better all the time. I would never feel comfortable just sitting back and letting it float along.
Yeah, and that's why I own my own business, because we now have authorship into how we're going to roll. So I get that. And some of the organizations that leaders are listening don't have as much autonomy as you and I do, so they have to work within structures. But I'm sure when you worked for people, even though it wasn't very long, I'm sure you pushed them too. It's just I'm trying to determine for our listeners, Martin, is this innate? Is this a personality thing, or can it actually be developed as a competency? As we kind of close this discussion, I think I'm going to have you back because I think we should study it and maybe refine it and find some practical tools. But what if somebody wanted to? They say it's not natural. They're listening to us and they're like, "Yeah, that's not me. I settle everything. I'm a either maybe not even a conflict avoider, but I don't want to push. I don't want to make people uncomfortable. What could we offer to them? Like for me, I had to become comfortable with conflict. That's I pursued that in a disruptive way through coaching and therapy and reading tons and tons of books. I wasn't going to go out into the world in my 40s and 50s and not be good at conflict. So I think you can behaviorally work yourself into that. Any thoughts on this topic? I haven't really. I'm a benefactory of people. I enjoy being pushed, but I don't have the natural giftedness that you do. I have to design. I literally have to get the whiteboard out and think about it. So
Right.
I admire it in you, and I want to be better at it. But I'm so stinking sensitive. My EQ is too high sometimes. I don't want to make people uncomfortable that I'm torn. I really am. So it's a conundrum sometimes. Any ideas? How do you help people that are like me or like others that just aren't there yet?
Well, first thing I would say is I don't think it is for everybody. And I don't think the world would want a whole bunch of pushing envelope people out there. I
That's a
think
great point. Yeah, you're right.
I need people that can calm me down, and I also
Mhm.
need people to challenge me. So I like to hang out with people that can actually challenge me to back, right? But I also need people, and my wife's a good example where she can really just bring the best out of me because she can just say, okay, take a breath,
Yeah.
let's move through it. You're talking to the family or whatever,
Yep.
and I think that's important as well. So I don't think everybody should want to do it or have to do it. Is it a learned thing? I believe so. I will just I'll just use Nelson Mandela's quote. Um,
Playing small.
it's always seems impossible until it's done,
Oh,
right?
right.
And it's so true, right? It's like anything. If you really want to learn that trait, it's learnable. It's absolutely teachable because even though it may come more naturally to me, I've had to hone it for sure, right? And I think that's the case for most people. Um,
But
but I would not,
some
yeah.
people shouldn't sing. They just can't. They can't carry a tune.
Well, I'm one of those people.
Oh,
I
get
mean,
out of
I've got,
here.
oh yeah, I've got my entire family has an unbelievable voice,
And
and
you can't
I'm
carry a tune.
surrounded by women, right? So they sound amazing. They sing in church. They got all kinds of. My youngest is playing music and actually recording music, and when I'm the guy in the pew that everybody like looks at when I open my mouth.
Now, for that kind of experience, for just enjoying music, I think you should sing, but I don't want you on stage singing to me. I just don't.
Yeah,
Stop it.
right.
So we shouldn't push
So
the envelope in some settings. That's all I'm saying.
so not all of us can be great musicians, and
Right.
nor can everybody be the guy that's trying to push the envelope. I
Yeah.
think they have
That's
to be.
really wise. I love that. Any books other than the Last Arrow? I was thinking of anything written Jim Collins and Good to Great. He's always he has another book called The 100 Mile. Oh, it's a subsequent book. I'm dropping it right now. The where he talked about people going to the South Pole and exploring. It's the 100X
Yeah.
mission. Very very gritty and pushing. So he's a good writer. Anybody else that's inspired you in this area?
Oh, for sure. I mean, there's so many of those adventure books and stories that Shackleton and made
Oh
these
yeah.
amazing adventures, and the guys who first summited Everest. I mean, those are great adventure stories. But I think a very recent book that I read that I've really really enjoyed, and I think is something that everybody can apply, is a book by Ryan Holiday called "The Obstacle Is the Way," and
Oh yeah. Yeah,
it is
great.
amazing because it helps you reframe things. So when you talk about pushing the envelope, one of the things we'd like to do is we want to take that obstacle and head it head first, right? Kind of go straight for it and solve the obstacle. And that's what he talks about, is how do we see the obstacle and use it in a way that allows us to find the way, right? And so using the if you want, the constraints of the obstacle to actually find a better way. And I think it's excellent the way it's written, and it's all based on Stoicism and a lot of kind of good philosophical thinking. But that's definitely helped me a lot.
Love it. I would obviously I would encourage the art of hiring a coach. I think coaches, mentors, therapists, people that will push you, that are skilled. If you want to get better at this, I also think you've got to believe that potential is an asset. I don't know how to say that differently, but some people, believe it or not, Martin, don't think of potential as an asset because they're very practical and pragmatic, and one in the hand's better than two in the bush.
Right.
So you're right. It's not for everybody. You really do have to believe in the upside of things. And I've always been an upside guy, having my own business my whole career. So, well, I love it. Thank you for pushing us. And I enjoy watching you. Obviously, I want you to get better and better at it. And as you learn, I think, you're going to be a great help to many others get better at it, especially if we can put words to it. And it's not, I love your conclusion. It's not just innate. There has to be some learnable parts of it.
Yeah, thanks, Doug. I've really enjoyed this, and I think when you said let's do a topic on pushing the envelope, I had to sit and think about it a little bit because,
Right.
like I said, it comes so naturally. I'm trying to put some words together. How did it come about? So I think this has been a really good exploration for me as well, which is all part of self-awareness, right? It's just trying to understand who you are. You can't be better if you don't understand who you are now, and you can't help others if you don't understand how you show up. And so I think this is all part of it. And I've really appreciated it. And I'd say, you asked me earlier what other resources, there's books, but I would say this podcast too is an amazing one to expand people's thinking around how does leadership as a currency show up. And so,
Yeah,
this has been a pleasure.
Sometimes the courage, and you've taken this journey, sometimes the courage isn't from climbing the mountain, it's softening the edge, right? There's an inner courage that has to happen too. So pushing the envelope in any direction is.
Yeah, I know we're coming to the end of this, but I'll leave with this thought, because I agree with you. Sometimes we think it has to be a physical push
right
to a physical end. And I think a big part of pushing the envelope is as simple as, finding, the thing in the dark corner of your woods that bothers you, right? Are you afraid of this or that? And it can be emotion. It could be family. It could be, background trauma. It could be whatever that little dark corner in the wood is, and moving towards that is somewhat pushing the envelope too. It doesn't have to be conquering Everest.
That's why I like your word uncomfortable. Anything that makes us uncomfortable, and that's different for all of us.
That's exactly right. But being able to look at uncomfortable and then step towards it is what's really driving the envelope.
Yeah. No, that's lovely. I will have you back if you're willing, and we'll just keep learning together. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Doug. It's been a pleasure, and you've been a good friend and mentor and colleague for a long time now, and I appreciate you.
It's mutual.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this podcast was encouraging, motivating, or provoking in useful ways, would you be willing to share it with someone you know who might need to hear this conversation? A review on your favorite podcast service is also always appreciated, and we'll see you next time.